Vortex Temporum is a piece by Grisey for Pierrot Ensemble plus viola, and it was composed shortly before the composer's death. It was written in 1995. Today I'm going to be looking at this score by Editions Recordi, and I'm going to be listening to a recording of it. Let's do the ensemble research. Why not? As always, Grisey has a lot of performance notes and program notes, so I think I'm going to take a little bit of time here just to go over that with y'all, and then we can get into listening. This is what the layout of the ensemble should look like. So any order is fine. Grisey suggests that the clarinet and flute be on one side, and then the low strings be on the other side with the violin centered, and then the piano at the back. And it is a complicated piece, so it is deserving of a conductor. If you're interested in knowing more about Grisey, I have another episode on his piece Talea, and that in that episode I do go over his career a little bit. There's flute in C, doubling on piccolo, alto flute, and bass flute. So all four flutes of the most common flutes you see in the flute family are played by one player. Then we have a clarinetist playing clarinet in A, clarinet in B flat, and bass clarinet. However, the clarinet in B flat is tuned a quarter tone lower. A similar thing was going on in Talea, where the clarinet in A was tuned a quarter tone lower. But yeah, one player for that, and then 3 string players. The pianist needs a piano that has a third pedal, and 4 notes on the piano have to be tuned a quarter tone lower. And let's see if Grisey lists the notes. Yeah. So the day before the concert, tune the piano normally, except tune C3 down a quarter tone, tune D sharp 4 down a quarter tone, tune A4 down a quarter tone, and tune F sharp 5 down a quarter tone. In this situation, if the piano is at A440, that A quarter tone flat should be 427.5. If the piano is at A equals 442, then that A quarter tone flat would be 429.4 hertz. I'm actually not that familiar with 442 tuning, but well, anyways, I don't think 442 is a pitch standard. It's so close to 440. It's like 8 hertz or something, so I think it might be some sort of quirk of piano tuning. But yeah, all the clarinet parts are written for Bohm system fingerings, like key work, and the string players need both ordinary mutes and lead mutes. I think a lead mute is like a practice mute. Okay, so there's 2 performance options. You can perform all 3 movements or just movements 1 and 2. I think I'm going to try and find a recording of all 3 just because I want to be thorough here. That's not 20 minutes of music. That's actually 41 minutes of music. So my mistake. And then just a little thing about the notation conventions here. This is 3 quarter tones sharp, quarter tone sharp, quarter tone flat, 3 quarter tones flat, and then He has like, sometimes he arranges accidentals to be a series of quarter tones. He also has arrows for slightly sharp, slightly flat. He uses a notation for relative dynamics. So dynamics based on how they are perceived, not based on the amount of force required to make them. And then his sort of idiosyncratic rhythmic stuff that we see in a lot of his scores with the horizontal lines. And then he has 4 sizes of fermata. Okay, I won't get too into the weeds here with the extended techniques, but he uses a lot of notations that were present in Talea, which we looked at a few days ago. Some of the piano stuff is interesting here. I don't think we saw this before. So he has half pedal indications and gradually releasing the pedal or gradually depressing. And if we look at the score, it's in landscape with all the ensemble members on the same staff, like one system per page. And it opens with this flute and clarinet line, which I believe is a quote from Ravel's Daphnis and Chloe. It's one of the very few instances of quotation in Grisey's music. And it's sort of like a little waveform. So we talked about that idea a little bit in Talea, but here it is as the first thing we hear is this like repeating kind of waveform that's oscillating. And I won't spoil what happens next, but you can see that this is a very nice handwritten score, and it starts very rhythmically, which is different from a lot of Grisey's pieces, and sort of a breath of fresh air, I think. I'll give it a listen here. I won't be listening to ensemble research. I'll just be using the Naxos recording. And it's split up into 3 videos, which is kind of nice. You can see that the second movement is much shorter than the other 2. And yeah, I'll see you on the other side here. This is a longer one. It's a very significant work. It's one of Grisey's last works, and I think it's a must hear. So let me get into it, and I'll let you know my thoughts. Okay, yeah, so a couple of things I wanted to mention before we get into the piece a bit. It's each movement is dedicated to a different composer. So the last movement here was dedicated to Helmut Lochenmann. The second movement was dedicated to Salvatore Chirino, so German composer, then Italian composer, and the first movement is dedicated to a Swiss composer. I'm already forgetting his last name. Yeah, Gerard Zinstag. One thing that I was able to hear better this time, I haven't listened to this in a couple years, I was able to compare the first and third movement better. Like, I had a better memory of the first movement when I had heard the third, and it's really remarkable how much noisier the third gets and how much more dense with activity, and yeah, it's a very satisfying sort of ABA form. But yeah, this time I felt like the first movement, while very iconic, is very sparse and kind of plain. Like, it doesn't have a lot going on in terms of using the whole range of sounds the ensemble can make. Whereas the last movement, it's got all kinds of noises and tasteful uses of the ensemble, bass clarinet, playing with like dynamic swells and pizzicato, all kinds of things. So yeah, it definitely has a very clear trajectory. And the second movement idea of these descending chords in the piano, which come back at the end, more or less, it's like sort of a what do you call it? Sort of like infinitely descending line. Like whenever the line gets to its lowest point, there's like a swelling climax in the ensemble, and then we start from higher. So the leaps back up are disguised, and it's sort of like a that's I'm so out of it today. Shepherd tone. It's like a shepherd tone idea. That's what I was thinking of. Um, Except instead of rising as we usually see them, it's descending. I really liked the quarter tone tunings of the piano. There was a really cool moment in the third movement where this trill between D and D quarter tone sharp like evolved into this huge climax, and I think it would be really fun to commission piano works for like Grisey tuning or Vortex Temporum tuning. I think that'd be really cool because it made a huge difference to the sound of the ensemble. And admittedly, like your ear kind of gets used to the four pitches in particular, but that moment in the third movement was still sounded fresh. Like the fact that he saved that trill, um, so it never got old or anything. It there was constantly new contexts where these four particular frequencies sounded really fresh and contributed to the ensemble. It sounded intuitive, like it sounded like it was just flowing from the composer, and I think that's a sign that it's a mature work, and it really gets you thinking like, what would Grisey be writing if he lived just 10 years more? Because this is like so fresh, and it's in the last years of his life. So this is a big one. I'm glad we got to it, and I'm glad I have the score to it still because it's a pleasure to look through. And we have maybe 3 pieces left, so we're nearing the end of our journey. And yeah, that's it for Vortex Temporum 1, 2, and 3 for piano and 5 instruments.